Welcome back for another podcast. And I have here Ariel with me, and we'll be going over the details of our trip to Egypt, what we have experienced, what we have seen, and where we went, and what really took place within the ethers and our physical bodies, the transformation that was guided by the higher celestial energies, and how it really affect our lives, and what did the group actually experience through the times that we went through different temples, as well as the final night when we were inside the Great Pyramid in the
Mm.
sarcophagus. So, Ariel, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit here?
Yeah. So my name is Ariel. I'm from the Philadelphia area. I've been working with Igor now for a little over a year. And yeah, my life has just completely shifted and transformed as I've expanded my awareness into my energy field and have been a part of this work that you've been doing and facilitating for me and with me. Um, and yeah, it was such an honor to be a part of this trip to Egypt. It was so deeply transformative and magical and truly it's going to be really interesting to put words to it in this podcast because in many ways there are no words for what we experience, but I'm really excited to share at least what we're able to in the English language on this podcast right now.
You are correct about that. The words do not have justice to the vibrations that we have experienced.
So this trip was planned, um, almost a year ahead of time. You got the message to host this pilgrimage through Egypt. I'm curious to hear what inspired that, what initiated this calling for you to bring a group through this initiatic path through these temples.
So, what initiated was in 2023. Uh, I had a beautiful chance to go to Egypt in September with Dr. Hertak and Desiree. And the experience during that time period, when I went to the Valley of the Kings in one of the chambers, I was fortunate. One of the guards saw me meditate and he's like, "Come here." And he let me inside of a sarcophagus. I went inside the sarcophagus, and there was actually five of us, and two, four people sat on the corners, and I sat in the center, kind of against the wall. And all of a sudden, this desire came in to hum. As I hummed, I instantaneously came out of my body, and I saw myself floating in the chamber. As I was floating there, all of a sudden, the walls started to shake of the sarcophagus, and they turned into sand. And as they turned into sand, Sekhmet came through on my left side, Anubis came through on my right side, Isis came through in the back, and Hathor came through above me. As each one came through, they gave me something, some sort of energetic or some sort of astral tools. But Isis gave me the wings and activated the energy in the back of my head. As that energy came through, I had this explosion of energy through the body while I was still in the astral plane. So I was observing myself and the people in the sarcophagus as we were sitting in it, because the sarcophagus was huge. It was maybe 10, like 12 feet by 8 or something like that, but it was pretty big. So during that time period, that information started to come through. And the guard comes in and he's like, "You need to come out." I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm like in a complete trance." So the other four people left, and I still stayed there in this meditative form. And I was like humming. And all of a sudden, I have a desire to go through that wall in my astral body to float back through the wall of sand. And as soon as I do that, a hand comes out of there and says, "Stop. This is not your universe. You can't go there." And I was like, came right back into my body. And the guy came back again, tapping me, says, "You need to come out. I'm going to get arrested," because he let me in to somewhere he's not supposed to. So as we came out of there, I knew right away, the images came through, that I need to come back to Egypt and I need to come there and do a full pilgrimage. That this was an initiation pilgrimage for the higher souls. Basically, when we go through the whole pilgrimage of Egypt, through Luxor all the way up, you're going through each chakra system. Each temple represents a different frequency vibration according to each individual of what they need. And when we get up all the way to Cairo and we go to the Great Pyramids, that is the activation of the pineal and an expansion into the astral body. So the whole purpose of Egypt is to find balance, healing, transformation, initiation into the astral realms. Because Egypt itself, you cannot really understand it or really feel it unless you perceive it from the eye of the soul, where you see things through the astral plane. The beings that put it all together, they understood the higher realms. Because until then, you're just walking through and looking at the beautiful stones and everything, not really understanding it. But to feel it and to see what was the divine design for these buildings were, or these structures, is the activation of the astral realms. So therefore, we cannot understand how they were built, why they were built, because our logical mind cannot understand the purpose of the celestial process of the higher divine thought. Only through that we can really see and decode what's really happening there.
Hmm. Yeah, and to clarify with our path, we arrived in Cairo, and then spent like 2 days there, did some sites there, and then flew down to Aswan and did a cruise up the Nile River, going up to all the sites, um, in the sequential order to eventually lead up to the activation we experienced in the Great Pyramid. And as we go through each temple, there's a series of activations and initiations that prepare your astral body and your heart resonance to be ready to have that pineal gland and astral body activation in the Great Pyramid. Um, so yeah, our first stop, we arrived in Cairo, and we did a few sites in Saqqara. Our first stop was the Red Pyramid, which was really incredible. It was so beautiful. In the physical level and also in the energetic level. Um, when I first arrived to Cairo, I actually got pretty sick, like physical symptoms. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was like on psychedelics. Like the energies in Egypt, and just to give context, we also spent about a week in Jordan ahead of time, or prior to this trip to Egypt, with a smaller group. Um, and I felt great in Jordan, and we had such a holy, beautiful experience. But once we were arriving into Cairo, my body was like going into shock. Um, I started getting body aches. I was in my hotel room when we got there, and I was like hearing voices. Spirits were coming to me. My vision space was very active, and I was experiencing a lot in my nervous system, and um, really just getting fully activated by just the energies of being in Egypt in general. And we haven't even gone to any sites yet or anything. And you know, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm just getting sick, on a physical level, um, to the point where I didn't even know if I was going to be able to go into our first couple sites that day in Saqqara. But I tapped into my inner guidance, and you know, I knew that these physical symptoms were a part of my alchemical process of what I was here to release in my body, my nervous system, and activate within myself. Um, so, despite me feeling really terrible, I went and decided to go with the group. And I'm also extremely claustrophobic. So, going into having the Red Pyramid as our first stop was very intense because that's actually one of the longest tunnels into any of the pyramids. Um, and it's very long and very narrow and very hot. And I really didn't know if I was going to be able to go in, but I did. And we made it in, and you and the group started doing a vocal activation in the first main chamber, um, which was really beautiful. I sort of went past and I was called to go up to the higher chamber. And as I walked up there, I was just immediately engulfed in this white light, this angelic energy just came into my field. Um, and you guys were doing a vocal activation down below, and I was sort of harmonizing on my own up at the higher chamber. And it was the first experience I had with vocal activation through this entire trip, which the vocal activation really was my anchor and played such an integral role in how I was able to experience these various sites and temples. But as I'm activating my voice, I'm able to move these energies through my body, all this really stagnant, icky energy that I was feeling in my physical. Through my voice, I was able to move it and open this higher portal and gateway to the angelic realms. And it was just alchemizing and moving all of this energy that was stuck and knotted in my nervous system and my physical body up and out. And I went from feeling so sickly and heavy and dense to so light and airy and just heart centered. And as I'm leaving that higher chamber, I just hear a voice, and it just says you are a servant of the light. You are a servant of the Most High. And it was just this remembrance of why I'm even here, why I'm even walking this path and doing that, because that kept coming up of questioning, as I'm going through all these physical symptoms and I'm not feeling good or not resonating with the food or something like that. Be all right, why am I here? Why am I putting myself through all this? And it would ultimately continuously lead back to that truth of the service I was here and there to do. But that was my first, remembrance of that during this trip. But yeah, so that was the Red Pyramid for me. I walked out feeling incredible, all my physical symptoms gone, and it was so beautiful.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of these pyramids, because these pyramids, when we go inside, we see how they are made in steps, and they're made, the ceilings are made in steps. They are actually very, they resonate to the notes, to the 12 harmonic notes. So when we do go inside there, the sound activates the pyramids. So there's different sound sequences that you can create for different types of transformations and healings. And when we do these sounds inside the pyramids, what really takes place inside of it? The stones are programmed. So it's made out of crystal, and the crystal inside the pyramids starts to activate because it has a memory. So the ancients knew about this crystal. It's like a chip, it's like a program, just like we have programs right now. It's a hard drive, right? It has a memory in it. So when we walk in there, through sound, you can activate it, because that sound activates the walls, because the walls were programmed to respond to these frequencies. And what happens is the walls start to become alive and they start to breathe. They literally start to breathe because when you walk into the pyramids at first, you can smell, there's a little smell of like mold or dense. And then once you start creating these sounds, wind picks up inside of them and the air freshens out. And the locals that work there, they know when the pyramid is activated is when the wind starts to blow through it. So by doing these mantras or certain sounds, frequencies in it, it creates a healing frequency within the body because the waves start to penetrate in all directions. So there's a whole technological aspect to it, right? And it also includes certain frequency vibrations of color, depending where you are faced inside the pyramid. So if you face to the north, you might receive like a bluish light or a greenish light. Each direction has its own different frequency vibration. So these systems, if we take a look at it, if you take a look at J.J. Hertog and Desiree Hertog, they wrote a book about the pyramids as well as the Keys of Enoch. I'm sure a lot of you heard of this. But in there, they talk about how this is a hydraulic system. Makes very much sense because when you walk inside these temples and these pyramids, we see um, that the system, the way it's designed, it all goes down to the Nile River. The Nile River is the only river that flows the opposite direction. So it has a way where natural water and salt water mixture takes place within the stones, within the granites and limestone, creating a hydraulic combustion system, which creates energy. Now, if that was creating energy, just like we have electrical stations here now, they are created just like Nikola Tesla did back in the day, utilizing the natural ethers. But to create that, we can only understand it through the astral realms. So then the question goes like, wait a minute. If that was the case, then this was a radioactive space there. Correct. Because if we take a look, there was no homes found around these areas. There were no living headquarters. And there was never found anybody buried in these pyramids either because they were utilized as energy vortices. So that was that pyramid, which was very powerful for me as well. As I stepped into it, right away the energy started to come through, and each temple or each pyramid has its own mantra. You'll be channeled to it. So I don't remember what it was for us, but something came through, and I remember we were standing in a circle against the wall, and all of a sudden, it was the first day, everybody came in with heaviness, and it was just like whoo, lifted off. Everybody walked out with so much energy, but before that, everybody was like, I'm not going, I'm tired, this, I just flew in, all kinds of stuff. But it was a very powerful experience. You can see the shift in the faces of people. You can see in the energy field how it all shifted. So from there, then we went to the next pyramid, which was the step pyramid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to the step pyramid, there was a very beautiful experience there as well because we saw the opening of the inside of the pyramid. And as we received some of that energy there, there was a powerful moment where one of the archaeologists was there and he says, do you know that they found lapis lazuli through the walls of the pyramid around the sarcophaguses? I said, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, they were lapis lazuli. And when you take a look at lapis lazuli, a lot of people say, oh, it's for the third eye activation. It is actually the stone that can harness the energy of the astral plane and connect and activate your pineal, which is correct. But also, the blue light is the light of royalty, and the blue light is the light of the cosmos and transformation. So they understood how to utilize color and certain stones for certain frequency vibrations in order to bring them down into this physical earth. So that showed how powerful and how wise these people or beings were during that time period.
Mm. Yeah, the step pyramid was one of my favorites. And so on the way from the red pyramid to the step pyramid, I felt great coming out of the red pyramid. My physical symptoms were gone. I was heart centered, and I get onto the bus and I'm having a conversation with somebody, and there was a really intense conversation about death that triggered my nervous system and brought all of my physical symptoms back. And a huge thing I was working through in my entire journey of Egypt was fear of death and my relationship to death that was sort of knotted into my nervous system that I had to work through over and over again. Every single day was a ceremony, was a alchemical process of all of these fears and things I was working through.
Where did you feel that full integration transformation take place throughout the whole journey?
Definitely in in my heart. Was the back and the front of my heart were the two main places for me that I felt that alchemy take place. And the step pyramid was a huge part of that process for me, because this came in, and all of a sudden, even though I was feeling great, I was on this high after the red pyramid, I started feeling all of these really dense physical symptoms again, even worse than before. And to the point where I was like, I don't even want to get off the bus. I'm not even going to go to this pyramid. And then the voice in my head was like, no, these physical symptoms are a part of this process. This is like, this is the journey. This is a part of what you're here to release. So I get off the bus, make the hot trek to the step pyramid. And the second we walk in there, I was just blasted with this lightness and this purity. And we walk to the back, and you're talking about just the technology that is in this chamber, and you can just feel it pulsating. And I'm just standing there in prayer and asking to receive this energy, and asking for healing and clearing of my nervous system, my physical body, my astral body. And as I leave, I'm just, again, physical symptoms are gone again. I'm feeling light in my heart, feeling heart-centered, feeling alive and aligned. And it was just so beautiful to have the first day of going through these sites have such a potent experience of really feeling on a physical and energetic level the technology that these sites really are, and the ability to utilize or experience these sites for these higher levels of healing. And so it was incredible. Step pyramid was so holy and beautiful.
Awesome. So then we flew over to Aswan, and then from Aswan, I believe we stopped at the Osiris tree. So it was basically the Osiris tree, and we had a powerful activation working with the father lineage, the male lineage of Osiris, who represented the divine masculine energy. So that was kind of honing that energy in, and we had a very powerful experience in there, connecting to our ancestral tree. And Osiris, we are aware that he was chopped up into 14 pieces. And that tree that represents him, so it grows in the waters, and connecting to the roots of it was very powerful for a lot of people there. And I remember as the channeling came through this meditative state, a lot of us got a chance to release those knots or those karmic patterns with our fathers, and that masculine energy. And then obviously we had a chance to bathe in those in the Nile River of the waters. That was a beautiful experience as well. It was a lot of connection for a lot of people with their masculine.
Mm.
And obviously, from there, then we went into the Isis temple, the divine feminine, which we came early in the morning before the sunrise. And that energy there is also very potent. The divine feminine, she will raise all the blocks from within you in order for you to recognize your own darkness and bring it all into light. And Isis is a very powerful representation of that, the divine feminine energy. So the temple there, we also had a powerful experience activation of the male and the female energies. And then we had a powerful meditation afterwards into the sunrise. The temple, which is very interesting, if you stand on it, you will feel it rocking. Even though they moved it from its original location, you can still feel the temple like rocking, shock back and forth, because the temple, the crystals that was found around it, very interesting. In some writings, they talk about this temple was the only temple that would elevate up into the air, and the crystal that is found around it is only found there, nowhere else, which is called the Isis crystal. Once you go there, they sell that crystal there everywhere because it's so abundant with it. And you can feel the rocking sensation of that divine feminine energy rocking you into this peacefulness,
Mm.
into this nurturing energy. So, yeah, how was your experience in the Isis temple?
Whew. Wow. Um, yeah, so the Isis temple was so profound and so powerful, and was full of a lot of duality as well for me. Um, so yeah, like you said, we arrived before sunrise. We had a very special permit to have a private visit, which was such an honor. And it allowed us to really hold a sacred space in there. Um, so yeah, we walked into, it's called the sanctuary room, is what they call it now. But there's essentially a pillar in the middle, like an altar. And it was completely pitch black, dark, and hot in there. And I walk in, and it's just the women. And for now, for this part of the ceremony we were holding, and um, it was my job to initiate this and to invoke the presence of Isis in this space that we were holding. And um, like, I've never in my life up until that point, like, experienced such like all encompassing energies in like a completely sober state, but I would even say it was more powerful than like any experience that I've had, regardless of plant medicine or anything like that. Like, it was just, you just felt this warmth, like you were fully in the womb of the mother. And up until that point, I was dealing with a lot of fear and a lot of just uneasy feelings, and all of that just dissipated and um, just transformed into love and safety in this space of the womb that we were in. And I begin to invoke Isis, and I'm moved to tears because the energy is just that powerful, and I feel her. I feel the Divine Mother, and I feel the unique essence of her frequency that Isis herself carries. And I feel her wings just wrap around all of us. And I'm just um channeling what's coming through. And um yeah, it was so incredibly beautiful. um and later on in the ceremony, we also experienced a lot of the pain, a lot of the darkness and the oppression that the feminine has endured and continues to. And um it was a really full spectrum ceremony where we experienced not just the heavenly divine aspect of the feminine, but the wounding that is still so deeply present within on this planet, within us individually. And it opened the space for continued processing and healing amongst the women afterwards as well, which was, it was challenging in many ways, but it was really beautiful, and was a really integral and necessary part of our journey that um, we had. So yeah, it was an honor, truly, like to um, just have that access to the temple that we did, and to be able to experience Isis in such a visceral, full bodied way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, and then the next temple on our path was later that day. We went to the temple of Kamumbo, which is the reptilian temple, the crocodile god Sobek, and I mean, really is the temple of darkness and duality. Um, so yeah, do you want to share what you experienced there?
The crocodile temple, which is considered the reptilian temple, which I actually, when we get into the spiritual path, the spiritual community finds this reptilian species a dangerous or negative species. Just like everywhere else, there's good and bad. But if we take a look into the Egyptian history, they actually worshipped the Kamambo uh, temple, and they understood the reptilian space and what role they play in our reality. There are actually images depicting how they would worship and give gifts to Sobek. Why is that? Why would they honor that? Why would they worship it? We come in there, these, the reptilians, but in reality, they have been holding space for us in a very strong way. What we consider darkness is absence of our own light. So everything has to have a balance in this universe. We have a reptilian brain, right? So we have the cerebellum, which is connected to that species. That's why it's called the reptilian brain. And they are actually have decided on a higher level to hold the space for us to dive into darkness so we can transform our own fears and darknesses within our reality. These aspects are shown very easily depicted in Egypt in the Kamambo temple. There is an image there where people are floating in the Nile River on a boat, and they're falling from it and going through this darkness, okay, where there's snakes and everything. And then they come out on the other side whole, complete, like they basically went through a tunnel. So when we have our awakening, we go through our darkness to the dark night of the soul to transform ourselves into light. So they hold the space for us to recognize our darkness so we can bring it into light. And that is very powerful because a lot of times we have so much judgment towards the negative aspect, towards the darkness. But all of that darkness is our own perception. So that temple has actually 7 chambers there, 7 doors. Now, those chambers are probably like, I don't know, 5 feet, 2 meters by 2 meters. And if you take a look, they tell you these chambers are made to store food. I don't know, these temples are kind of huge to store 7 chambers of 3 meters by 3 meters or 2 meters to store food. So we take a look into it, and you actually, if you make a sound in each chamber, the same sound, and each chamber, the sound will be different. Those chambers are locked, but when you go there private visits, they might open them up for you. So when you make the sound there, you actually hear different frequency vibrations. The 7 chambers represent the 7 keys to the 7 chakra systems, to the 7 darknesses that need to be transformed into light. Because each chakra system has its own belief system, has its own dimension. And in order to do that, we have to transmute the darkness. So Kamambo Temple holds the space for us to transmute that, which is very powerful. and that is the space between the second center and the solar plexus. So it allows us to really dive into those areas. um, by being there the first time that I came, it was very powerful to see that and liberating, because the belief system that people have about reptilians really has to change. Everything is there to serve you. And if we really try start to understand how the divine ancients knew about this, we're just going backwards in time to understand what really was there already and bringing it into this moment now. So when you walk there, you are actually walking through timelines, dimensions. You'll have flashes of images. For me, at least, that's what happens. I start seeing different dimensions and times and how they correlate to me in this current moment in time. So the other temples that we walked through, the experiences were profound, and it's like you are a walking meditation through these temples.
Yeah, so that day we went through that temple was when I was going through some of my deepest darkness of the whole journey. Um, and, you know, I didn't even really want to go. I was like going through and I was like, Igor, am I really about to go to the Temple of Darkness right now? I don't know if I can handle this. And you're like, no, like just walk with me, and you're literally like, all right, stay with the Father. Like I just had to keep realigning myself. And yeah, being there, it was really interesting, and this was really the start of where I was really, I went through a few days on the trip where I was so energetically sensitive, but I was only able to like see darkness. It was really like bizarre and intense, and like a big process for me. And at this temple, I'm looking around, I'm just seeing um, all of these energies and darkness and things that I'm not fully normally able to see in my normal waking state, but I was just my astral body, everything was so open, but my perception was like, I don't want to say, I guess distorted could be a word to use for it. Distorted in the sense where I was only able to really see the darkness. And so the Kamambo temple really was this initiation for me into really learning, being able to see my darkness, and um, from that place of being able to perceive it, to then be able to alchemize it and transform it, and use it for my greater good and my higher purpose as we went further along this path through the rest of the temples. So,
But for me to go, when we first started to go into Kamambo Temple,
mm,
for me was very powerful because that's where I felt the Christ consciousness come through. I felt the energy of my oversoul completely come through. The reason is because when you're in a higher state of consciousness and vibration, you will experience the higher dimensions of these temples. These temples will force stuff out of you and whatever needs to leave. So each temple will have a different resonance vibration of what each individual needs to release. So while we go through these temples, some people will feel like uncomfortable or see different things or feel different things. For each individual is different. And as we were walking in there, I remember so clearly this beacon of light just enters my body as I was walking into the temple, because my whole focus was to make sure that all the people that are with me to receive the vibration and the channeling that they need in their moment. um, because that was like, okay, that was the main thing for me, is like to make sure that everybody's fully aligned to have their divine transformation in the most effortless way. But Egypt is a dualistic place and it's a powerful place, but towards the last days, it was definitely worth it, especially when the time we came to the Sphinx. So
mm,
I'll get into that story later of what I have experienced as the work that we did in the Sphinx as well as the pyramid. But we did get to the Horus Temple, and the Horus Temple was um, it was magnificent as well. Then from there, we went to the Temple of Luxor. Luxor was also very powerful, and you can see the pillars of light inside the pillars there.
Yeah.
So we did have a chance to do activations, and we actually let the group actually say, "Okay, go ahead, go with the flow, see what you're feeling there." It was very beautiful to see how people were like just guided to different parts of the temple, and how they were also guided by the people that are working in these temples, because these people that are working in the temples, they are the guardians on the soul level, but on the physical they might not seem that way. But on the energetic level, they are the guardians that will naturally take your hand or grab you and say, "Okay, come here, you need to come here." And you touch a wall here, and you boom, you have this activation. They take you to a certain ankh image, and they like show you that, and you touch it there, and it's like, wow, you had these downloads. So Egypt is a golden crystalline key codes within the temples of the walls, which created by the ancients through the crystallization and programming of these temples. They knew how to bring matter into life. That is the most powerful thing. It's like when you walk into a sacred place, you feel the opening, you feel that energy. Each temple is a sacred place. Until late 18th century, until the English came in, the locals would actually gather in these temples to receive healing. Women would go there to receive healing if they couldn't get pregnant, or men that needed some sort of healing. People, they would go to these temples. They would actually sleep there in those temples
Mm.
to get these healing experiences. Until recently, they made it private, and then you have to pay to enter.
Yeah, the Temple of Luxor was such a phenomenal temple for me, and for the entire group. We all
Yes.
experienced our own different activations. Um, and upon arriving there, um, I the energy there was so intense that I literally like felt like I could pass out. Like I was like worried. And I was feeling great beforehand, and I get there and I'm like, ooh, like I just get blasted. And I was like, um, I just had to sort of go off on my own and like process. And I was going through and singing and just on my own little journey. And, at one point I started feeling guided to go to a specific area. So I started walking, and I was guided to go into this one chamber, and I get in there, and like 5 people from our group are in there, like doing an activation. And I was like, okay, cool. Perfect. Thank you, Spirit, for guiding me here. Um, and so, and like you were saying, the guards are these guardians that actually will facilitate activations and different experiences for you if you allow it to happen. So this one guard like was like protecting this chamber for us. So because technically you're not really allowed to do these activations and things. So he was like, all right, 5 minutes, and like he was watching and guarding for us, and it was really sweet. And so we were all standing in a circle, and we all tuned into the specific sound frequency of this chamber, and we all tapped in and harmonized together. Um, and Jewel had a like singing bowl, so we were doing that, um, and then Marcia was guided to get in the center of us, and she's guided to place her hands on each of our hearts, and goes around to each of us. And all of this, like all of the really intense energy that made me feel like uneasy and like I could pass out, like comes up into my heart space and just like blasts out like a dove. And there's just this like profound lightness in my heart. And I'm just like couldn't stop smiling. And like we're all like like just looking at each other like, wow, like this is so epic and incredible. And we were all so in our heart space and just had this beautiful heart activation collectively. And Mickey had on his phone like the map of the chambers and what they represent. And he's like, oh my God, guys, this is the heart chamber. And like we didn't even know, but we just experienced just intuitively and through our guidance together, this profound heart activation. And it was so, so beautiful. And
Powerful.
yeah,
That's really powerful. Yeah. A
yeah,
lot of the groups, yeah, it was beautiful to see the groups like spreading apart and then somehow they come together in different chambers
yeah.
or different hallways that they were guided to. So it was like divinely orchestrated on all levels.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I know you had like a throat activation in the Luxor temple as well. I don't know if you want to share about that.
Yeah, in the Luxor temple, so as you walk all the way up in the chamber of the throat there, it was a very powerful experience where all of a sudden it just started to mantras or some sort of voice activation came through, and I was just singing there, and I remember this voice started to come through, and as it started to come through, I started to see the waves from my throat penetrating through the people that were walking. And as they were walking, they started to become activated. I saw the waves going through their heart spaces and they were just becoming activated as they were walking through. And I was standing in the center. And when you're there, if you're touching it or you're doing anything like that, the guards tell you, like, stop. But I was standing there and just doing it, and they were not saying anything. They were just walking by, and like the person behind me or in front of me, they'll tell them, "Don't do this." But I was at that point where I was completely invisible. But yet they were there. They saw me, and they did not stop me. And I continue singing these mantras that were coming through. They were so powerful to the point where I started to see the souls of the people without seeing the human, and I started to see how the humans are asleep. And that touched me really deeply. Is like, mankind is asleep. They need to awake. They're just walking through these places, not really truly understanding. They're receiving stuff, but without the higher connection. As I continued singing these mantras that were coming out randomly, I started to notice that the people were coming into their hearts instantaneously. It was like the vocal activation of the throat that was bringing the people into their hearts. Then I remember Bobby was standing there. A few other people were standing there. My father was standing there as well. It was very beautiful to experience my father come to this trip and my oldest daughter, because it allowed me to heal the DNA of the family going backwards and forwards of that lineage, which was very profound experience to see the activation of your family ancestor tree going backwards and forwards, as well as my aunt from my dad's side. It was something that I did not expect for them to come at all until I announced it. But in that Luxor temple, I saw how the knots of the karmic DNA were being untied, literally being untied. So the family lineage tree, all the way to the RNA, can be liberated. And it went back all the way to the time um, of creation of Osiris, Isis, but even went even before that time period into the family members of it, of Nut and Gab. So that lineage was really taking liberation to that timeline. So to see that experience was a very powerful. From that moment on, that's when Thoth came through,
Mm.
and that I remember Thoth came through, and that's when he started to walk with me for the rest of the journey. Yeah, it was really guided. I was really guided by him to walk through these temples. As I walked through these temples, certain images would come out at me, and I would be taken to the timeline when they were activated. when I started to see that these temples, the way they were created, was very, very interesting. That these temples, they were not created by just man or woman or any beings. They were created through the space of the ether. So if energy creates matter, they knew how to manipulate energy through the astral or the ether in order to formulate these temples. And all these temples used to have a roof. And when you walk in into these some of these temples, you see the roof is like covered in black tar. And you ask the people that work there, they'll tell you like, "Oh, it was the locals that were making fire here." And I'm like, "Excuse me, the locals were making fire? These ceilings are like 20 meters high. I don't think they were making fire. And if they were making fire, the fire does not spread out in pieces. It was equally burned out through the ceiling." So we now understand that these were combustion chambers that would activate a certain gases within these temples that would create holes in them. You can see they have shafts, and the shafts are usually when they're built. If you take a look at the military, the way they build them, they usually face down. These shafts were facing up into the cosmos in different solar systems,
Mm.
in different stars of Orion and different constellations within it. I was like, okay, this is very interesting. So I projected myself into those spaces, and I understood that they showed me that they were created with combustion of gases and certain minerals and a certain mixture of percentages that they understood how to manipulate this matter. And they would receive this energy into the temples, and then the temples would have an explosion inside, and all the hieroglyphs would appear, that they were books. These are the holes of Amentes that we talk about. So they would become the writings on the walls as you walk through them. And these writings would enter into your astral plane, and you would download this information just by looking at the images, even though you might not understand it. But the information is being downloaded into the astral mind. So as I continue walking through these temples, a thought starts to explain to me how they were created through these channels which were downloaded from other solar systems and imprinted into the walls. So when you look at the art on the walls and the hieroglyphs, they all utilize the golden ratio.
Mm.
They are so precise that there's no mistakes on any one of them. There's literally no mistakes. Every single image is geometrically precise. So the question arises, well, how is that possible? We as humans can make little mistakes, but there's no mistakes anywhere there. So this shows it was some sort of a technology that was utilized by a higher consciousness. Now, you don't have to believe it of what I'm telling you, but be open to perceive, just to receive it or not. It will resonate to understand, like, okay, this resonates with me, it doesn't resonate. And to really understand this, we have to merge the 5D and the 3D together. We cannot separate those two, these realities. We have to merge those realities. Because the other thing that was shown to me, that the pyramids throughout the whole world were activated at the same time, meaning that when they were activated, it's like basically having all your chakra systems activated. Now you start to feel and see different dimensions simultaneously. So the chakra systems around the earth, or the pyramid grids, were activated the cosmic energy into the earth. So we were able to merge with the higher dimensions and matter at the same time and walk through these spaces. But our astral body was activated and we were aware of it. It was not separate. That's why it's called the astral body, because it's still part of your body. In our energy fields, we get the information. So that was one of the biggest revelations that I received throughout these temples, to see the connection between these two dimensions and how it really was formulated.
Wow. Yeah, I had my own sort of revelations with um, the concept of receiving these codes within the field, whether or not you understand what the hieroglyphs mean on like a mental
Exactly.
level. You're like, these temples are these cosmological libraries of information. And like, I had this experience where we were on the cruise ship, and I just started playing music and I was dancing on the rooftop of the cruise ship, and my vision space opens again, like I'm on like a like a psychedelic trip. Like, it's very visual, and I see just all these codes that I've been receiving throughout the temples. All these hieroglyphs are coming through. And as I'm dancing and moving my body, they're like integrating. They like come, they're just sort of, we're in my field, and they start integrating into my body and integrating deeper and crystallizing in my body and in my field through my movement. And it was so profound, and really helped me to process everything that we were experiencing, because like the personality and on the mental level, like you want to understand and you want to be able to like just think or understand on this mental level everything that's happening. And like, so much of what Egypt activates within you is within the astral field, and it's things that take months to fully integrate into yourself and into your being. um, and yeah, so it's really profound to go through these experiences and just be receiving these codes and walking through these timelines and these stargates. And yeah, so
Yeah, I remember after that we went to the Valley of the Kings.
yeah.
Valley of the Kings was a very powerful place as well, because there's a lot of tombs that haven't been discovered yet. So there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been really open. But as so much people go there, I mean, Disney World does not compare to that. It's so packed over there. And if each person just takes one rock out, they will excavate the whole place, because that place does get busy, definitely. Yeah, the Valley of the Kings was pretty good for me, because last time I was there, I received a lot of downloads there. But when after that, we went to Hatshepsut Temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hatshepsut Temple, we went to Hatshepsut Temple. That temple was actually very powerful for me. As I went up the staircase, and I stood between the door pathway, and again I started to create these mantras, started to come through, these voices, vibrations. As they started to come through, they started to activate. And for me, just being in that doorway was a powerful experience, where I started to receive the downloads of um, of beauty. It was downloads of the divine beauty. Why? Because it was like, to have beautiful things and to exist in a beautiful world is a beautiful experience of the soul itself as well. The soul is beautiful. So we also have to learn how to accept these beautiful things in the world, and not to say, oh, this is too much, blah, blah. It was a very powerful message that came through. And that beauty was the unification of the heart and the upper heart. So it was like the heart and the throat center that came together in that experience for me. I feel like most of Egypt for me was the experience of the throat activation, which is the Akashic plane, which is the astral plane, which is also the plane of the halls of Amentes. In order to really walk through them and to be guided through them, uh, we need to step into our throat space. But to step into the throat space, we need to balance out the lower chambers as well, the lower chakra systems. I actually like utilizing the word chambers instead of chakras. So that will be probably my new expression on that. So yeah, and then after that, we came back to the hotel, and I was still guided, like, we need to go back. Go back to the Valley of the Queens. And they're like, no, we're so tired. A lot of people did not want to go. Like, we're going to take a nap. I said, you know what? I'm feeling guided. I have to go. Who wants to come with me? Raise your hand. I was like, about 20 people said yes. So we order a car or a bus for us, and we go to the Valley of the Queens. This is 4 o'clock, scorching hot. In Valley of the Queens, there were two tombs that was available. One of them was the tomb of 44. And I cannot pronounce the name. I'm not going to even try to break my tongue. But we go inside of it, and there's a sarcophagus there of a child. And as we walked inside of it, we right away felt that there was like this heavy energy there. So we started to kind of just do a little meditation as we grounded in. We felt the connection of the inner child to the cosmic child. So, and there was such a powerful activation that we opened and healed the inner child within ourselves and allow it to connect to the cosmic child of the universe. So that was a powerful linkage between those two. Then from there, we went to another uh, tomb. And over there was another connection where we activated the whole tomb. And once we activated, the whole group was teleported to a different dimension. And there was a being that appears in the astral plane and starts saying, this place hasn't been activated throughout times. And it was like, what? And we open our eyes, and this being just walks by. As he walks by, I look at the being on the wall, and I'm like, that was the being just walked by. So it was very powerful experiences there because we had the integration of the inner child into cosmos and taking us different parts of Orion's constellation. Now, in Orion's constellation, there's Betelgeuse, there's other constellations that are nearby, which create this harmonious relationship of the stars. So we are the star being, and we collect all these wisdoms from different civilizations of the stars into our being. So these were powerful activations for us as we walked through it.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. I missed the Valley of the Queens. I took a nap.
A
It was
lot of people took a nap. They decided not to go, and those that did were like came back. They were like, like, let's go somewhere else. I was like, no, no.
um but yeah, the next temple on our path the following day was the Temple of Hathor, which was my absolute favorite temple that we had the honor of experiencing. Just on a physical level, the architectural beauty, the blue paint that's still there, but connecting to Hathor, who I hadn't worked with prior to walking into her temple. Um, it was so profound, and the art, the music that was pouring through me as I walked through each chamber um, was incredible. I was just channeling such beautiful song and activating my voice. And um, Hathor is really the original divine mother figure of ancient Egypt. Isis actually came later in the Greco-Roman period. Um, and yeah, to just feel the loving energy of Hathor and to experience her artistry just moving through me as I walked through each chamber was just my favorite experience for the most part of our journey. It was so beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Hathor, she's a very powerful being, but if you pay attention to it, in that temple, we had little gnomes,
Mm-hmm.
beings that were uh, statues of little beings that were probably like about 3 feet tall. And Hathor as well, we have depiction of her, only her head, and her ears are the ears, I believe, of a cow, correct?
Yeah.
And she was able to shift, I believe, shapeshift. Um, Very interesting experience there as well. For me, that Hathor temple was the temple of transformational beauty,
Mm-hmm.
which also took me to Mexico and reminded me of the temple of Uxmal in Merida, Mexico. Why? Because they also had the same smaller beings representing that transformational beauty there. And in Uxmal, they talk about whenever these smaller beings were born, they were considered the wizards of the stars.
Mm.
They were able to transmute or transform things. And if we take a look at the story here, it's very similar to that. So there's a connection between um, those two different parts of the world. But the layout of the temples and the pyramids in Egypt, they correlate to Orion's belt, and it goes to Jordan. Um, but if we go to Mexico and the peninsula there, and the pyramids in Mexico, they correlate to the Palladian constellation. So they were built according to those constellations. So it's a very powerful experience to see that and to understand it, because now you're telepathically connecting to those stars.
Mm.
So after our Hathor experience, we went to the Osirian temple. When we got there, we had the privilege to get a private tour and go inside one of the chambers that was opened up for us. It was a really huge chamber where we were able to do a meditation there. So the Osirian temple, as we went in there, we see where the flower of life was imprinted into one of the stones. The stones there are very interesting. They have a program inside of them. There are some pools of water in Osiris temple there, and these pools of water are very interesting because there were a few archaeologists that came in there and tried to pump the water out. When they tried to pump the water out, they were not able to fully retrieve the water. As soon as they would retrieve it, it would come back to the same level.
Mm.
So they started to do experiments with the water to see what's really happening there with it. And what they found out was that it would come back to the same level. So that showed that the stone was programmed to manipulate the water. How? They don't know. So one of the archaeologists, as he continued to do this work, he decided to take this water and go home and filter it. So he put it through a filtering system, and then he started to drink that water himself. As he started to drink that water a few months later, he noticed that his eye vision improved, and some of the cells in his body were healed actually. So that was very interesting to see that documented by one of the archaeologists who had the privilege to go there and do these experiments. But if we take a look at it, and they did some sonar rays, and they saw that the whole temple of Osiris is actually on water, and it defines gravity because the huge blocks of granite that it's based on, it should have sunk already. So if we take a look at that, the Osiris temple and Isis temple, both representation of the divine masculine, divine feminine, are based on the water. Now take a look at our system. Our inner child is in our second center, which is the water. So the mother, the father is supported or held, or we are being held in the divine child. So the system is very similar to the system of our physiology. But the only thing is, how do they know these stones would work and operate this way? Because they're all made out of crystal. And crystal is programmable. We know that because we use crystal in all different technologies. As I started to walk around in the Osirian temple, I came across a very interesting image. One of the images depicts two people having two left thumbs. They're not having a left and a right thumb. The beings have literally two left thumbs. There's no right or left, they're just both same direction. As I'm looking at it, the guard comes up, or actually, he wasn't a guard, he was the guardian and the main archaeologist of Osiris Temple. And I started questioning him. What is this? Why did it? He's like, well, it depicts that these beings are dancing for Osiris and their hand is a little bit twisted. I said, what do you mean? A little bit twisted. They have two left thumbs. He's like, yeah, it's actually, they made a mistake. I was like, no, 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 no. This art here cannot be mistaken because everything is based on the golden ratio. They have done everything so precisely. Tell me the truth. He's like, no, 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 this is what it is. So we stood there, we talked a little bit, and then he kind of just opened up. He says, well, do you know that where they show the airplanes and the helicopters, that's in the Osiris temple? So he says, well, you know, they talk about the planes and everything. I'm going to show you something. So we kind of just got along. He starts showing me some other doorways that are depicted inside the temple. But on the other side, there's extra chamber rooms, which were just discovered 16 years ago or so, which is not open to the public. So he shows me another temple, another part of the temple, where we go in and it shows where, and it describes how other beings would land. What does that mean? They would land. And the roof of Osiris temple, there's a part of it that is actually going upwards. So if you take a look at geometrically, you see all the roofs are flat. That one has an angle where it starts to open up. So there was some sort of a shaft that would open and close in order for things to land. So what does that really mean? As I stood there and I tuned in, I looked at the ground, and the ground had a hole in it, like caved in concrete. That caved in concrete showed like a big boulder would drop on it and it caved it in. So it showed that there was some sort of a teleportation portal in that area. It was very powerful to see that, to experience it, as to connecting as through the ethers into it. You right away see, okay, there were other dimensional beings that would travel through this space here. So they even have this writing on the walls, so explaining how other dimensional beings would teleport or somehow transport into this area.
Hmm. Yeah, that temple was very incredible to walk through and to go into all of these different rooms with all of these different portals. Like my vision space was so tapped into the how this temple was this stargate, and it like all these different rooms that literally would have these doorways that weren't like real doorways, it was stone, but it would be these doorways that would lead to, there were literally portals to these other dimensions, and in my vision space I could see that. And yeah, this particular temple also opened me up to see how the physical temple on this earthly plane is actually a projection of these temples that exist in the higher dimensions as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really profound. And to clarify, also, there was the Osirian temple and the temple of Abydos are sort of connected like this. Osirian is a more megalithic temple that's in the back, and then the Abydos temple is in the front, but it's all sort of a part of the same complex that we experienced there.
Yeah, but then after that, we went to the Karnak temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, the Karnak temple is a magnificent temple, a temple which sustains out of several different temples. And you can see as you enter into the Karnak temple, the powerful structure that it was created. The Karnak temple is a representation of the 7 chakra systems, from going from down, going up from the entrance. And then from the left to the right is an activation of the emotional, mental, and causal body. As you walk through these temples, whichever way you go, whichever way you're guided, you are definitely finding a balance between those levels within yourself. That temple is a layout of your energy bodies all the way to the causal body. And we went in there, and as we went to Sekhmet or Bath, her name is Ba, we had a beautiful connection there with Bath, and she is so powerful. She's a representation of the divine mother, who is basically brings souls into life. So she is the bridge between the sun's rays and the physical realms. She is considered the midwife. So she would actually receive the children during birth. So she is a channel to receive the souls into physical reality. As she does that, when you come to that temple, it definitely creates a healing space in your inner child. So that temple there and the representation of her vibration in that stone, it is so felt, it is so resonant that just coming nearby without any intention, each individual feels that frequency there. So we had a beautiful um, chance to go inside and have a full activation with that uh, chamber and the vibration of Bath. She was very nurturing, very sharp, but very nurturing.
Yeah, that was such a profound experience. And I had no idea. Like we had, private access to various chambers and everything. So I just thought we were walking into another normal chamber. And I walk in and I'm just like, oh, like it was like a jump scare. Like I like I just got blasted with this incredible energy that this statue was emanating, and it was one of the most special experiences, and so grateful that we got to have access to her, because she is like literally locked away with lock and key in this one specific chamber that's sort of at like on off to the side of the main areas of Karnak Temple. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was really beautiful to experience her.
Well, let's take a look at something though.
Mm-hmm.
She's a representation of the black cat, right? So she's the black cat. And then we also have Anubis. Anubis is the black dog, right? If you take a look at the gods of Egypt, they all have some sort of a representation, but they are the two that are actually black. So she receives the souls into this earth, and he transitions the souls out of this earth. So both of them play a big role of entrance into this reality and exit out of this reality. It would be very interesting to see where Anubis himself was actually stored and see how that
Mm-hmm.
experience would be. So as we continued in that temple, I know a lot of people actually walked into the seven keys of Karnak Temple, and those seven keys represent the seven chakra systems. And I was guided to actually walk towards the right side of the temple, which took me into the pool of waters, which represented the Divine Mother. And that pool of waters, we connected to the Divine Mother, and then I was guided to go further. My oldest daughter was with me, and Bobby. So the three of us, we continued going, and we came to this place, which an open place, and we knew that this is the place for a higher vibration. As we started to stand there, it was guided like turn around, turn around. I started to turn around until the sun was behind me. Soon as I turned around and the sun was behind me, all of a sudden this ray of light enters the back, and Bobby was with me, and we feel this powerful energy of Christ consciousness just enter into the back of our hearts, in the back of our minds, and an illumination takes place.
Mm.
Like I'm talking about, I can feel it even now. This illumination came through, and we knew right away it was the Christ consciousness that was beaming down. So after that experience, we stood there for quite some time, feeling these downloads, these energies that came through. We went to another part of that temple. As we went to another part of the temple, there were closed doors there, closed chambers there. And those chambers over there had cobras depicted, and the temples depicted monkeys or gorillas. Monkeys, it was in that area. We went into there and we were led into one of the chambers where we stood, the three of us. And all of a sudden, there was this healing energy that started to come through. And whoever was in the center was receiving the healing energy. And we knew that was the energy of Osiris channeling it through. Because as we were standing, two people were basically the receivers, or basically the conduits, and this person in the center was the receiver. And then we started to switch around. As that energy started to uplift us, we started to release mental patterns. We felt it all starting coming out of our field and from our bodies as well, all the way through the cellular structure. It was pulling things out from our cells, from our nervous system, from our veins. And it was so powerful that we felt illumination of it. So after that, we decided, okay, it's like we've been there for quite some time. We went to a few other places. Then they let us into a chamber that goes underneath. And we saw how underneath there were reservoir waters, because water is utilized throughout Egypt everywhere to activate, is the purification of everything. We come into our waters, we're 75% water. Our cosmos is water. So we knew that they understood the importance of water. And water actually represents the Holy Spirit. Jesus got baptized in water. Osiris also with water. Isis temple is also on water. And if we pay attention to that, our inner child is in water. When we are born, we're in the womb of our mother, we're surrounded by water. It is a very important part because that is the representation of the Holy Spirit, the energy of the dove.
Mm.
So we continued, and I saw the map of the temple, and the map of the temple where we received the Christ consciousness energy was called the Temple of Celebration. We walked to our causal body. So I know there were, if you go vertically or horizontally, horizontally all the way up, you will see that you are walking through the activation of the ankhs of the seven chakra systems. And I know a lot of our group members went there, and they ended up being at the head of the crown to receive the activation of the seven ankhs.
Yeah, I was one of those people, and it was a really special experience because I had no idea that I would even end up there. Kelly and I went on a little journey on our own, and we had actually the lead guard of Karnak Temple guide us through all these different spots, would show us where to pray, and we were just like receiving this Mother Mary energy and this one particular spot of the temple. Like it felt like it was like this inner child in like this nursery. Like it felt like we were in a nursery, and he showed us where to pray. And so we were in there and just receiving just such beautiful Christed energy there. It was just so pure and so holy. And then he took us to some other chambers, showed us what like spots, what hieroglyphs to touch, other spots to pray, other chambers to be in. And then he ends up taking us out to the outskirts of the temple, and we're following him. And he just takes us to this like random spot. I didn't know where he was taking us, but he was like, "This is very special. Don't tell anybody." And I was like, "Okay." And so we get there, and he shows us how to activate these 7 doors. It was like this portal with like this portal door with 7 layers. And he shows us like where to put our hands and where to put our head and like to activate on this. And as I'm doing that, I start hearing voices like in the other room. And I was like, who else is here? Um, and so Kelly and I do that. And then we walk into the other room, and we walk in, and there's just our group is just there, like 7 of us. Your dad was there. And me and Kelly are like, oh my God, because we were just on this like crazy journey with this guy. And then he leads us to this ceremony that our group is having. And it was so special. And, um,
Isn't
you
that
know, that,
powerful how synchronized the group was? It's like we all went separate ways and then boom, you guys all still met together, divinely orchestrated.
it would always happen. And it was so special. Um, and me and Kelly were just like, what? Like it was such a special moment. And they're in the middle of this ceremony where, so on this wall in this like little temple chamber, whatever you want to call it, there wasn't much hieroglyphs left. It looked like they got removed somehow or covered up. But all that was on this wall was these 7 ankhs, these 7 keys. And so there were 7 people, and each one of us went up and picked a key and would express what was on our heart. Um, and it was this ceremony where we were opening the 7 layers of the heart. And um, yeah, it was so beautiful. And
I definitely remember that because I remember seeing my father afterwards. His
mhm,
heart opened up.
yes.
Literally, it was like open. It was. This is the first time that I've seen that.
Mm,
It was a very powerful transformation. Karnak Temple
yeah.
is definitely one of the most powerful temples. I mean, they're all powerful, but the way they are set up and the way it leads you up, it's like it's coming into the heart space. Karnak is the unification of the physical body and the energy bodies together and through the heart chakra systems. The 12 doors of the chakra, there's actually 7 there. There's 12. If we activate those 12 doors of the chakra systems, that's where the unification happens, takes place. Yeah, that's something that I go over in the course of the 12 chakra systems within of the energy bodies. And when we fully activate them and align them, they just become so powerful.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it was so powerful. It was so beautiful to witness your dad's transformation in that, and all of our transformations afterwards. And um, yeah, it was, Karnak was definitely one of my tops as well. Like, just
Yeah.
such a holy.
Egypt Egypt starts off like basically you start off with the lower chakra systems, right? And we kind of step into a darkness. And then as we come up higher, Karnak temple starts to clear it all out. And then from the Karnak temple, we go now all the way to the Sphinx. And we
Mhm.
come into the pause of the Sphinx. And the pause of the Sphinx, we were able to go there early in the morning before the sunrise and do a meditation. And in the pause of the Sphinx, this is where you unite the masculine and the feminine energy. The pause of the Sphinx are also very interesting. How that whole space there is a connection between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. There was actually 2 Sphinxes before, so there's only just one left. And it goes. There's a chamber underneath that goes to the Great Pyramid. That chamber underneath is there's a sarcophagus there, which they call the Osiris chamber. I don't know why they call the Osiris chamber, but that chamber is the chamber that takes you into the underworld. So
Mm.
that unifies you and allows you to rise up and not to have fear of the darkness or the light, because all of them are valid. So that unifies the human concept of the lion of the heart with the mother father joining within the heart with the great pyramid activation of the pineal pituitary and the hypothalamus. So the three chambers represent in the Great Pyramid of activation within the three glands within the body, within the mind, and within the heart. When we unite all of that, and that's where we went into afterwards, and we sat there and we did a powerful meditation. I did not even notice that we were meditating for an hour.
Mhm.
Um, the energy was so powerful. I remember there were pictures taken, and you can see the merger between the 5D and the 3D taking place through those pictures, because you can see the energies of different dimensional beings flowing through it. It was very interesting and powerful to experience that. I feel like coming into the pause was an activation and a doorway that opened of the heart. It was like the tablet of light within the heart space was initiated, um, and create a balance between the masculine and the feminine energy. So it took us all to neutrality, and all the other centers that kind of rose up into the heart space.
Mm. Yeah, the Sphinx was so powerful. And having that private visit, being able to meditate in between the pause was just such a profound experience. And my intention going into Egypt in the first place was to experience that inner union within myself and the merging of my own masculine and feminine. And yeah, I really felt that as well, sitting in that meditation. And other things occurred later that further initiated that inner union. But yeah, so we had the Sphinx, and then our final stop for the whole group was the Great Pyramid.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, we
the
had a
great
very special private visit there. So
the Great Pyramid is a powerful space. I was fortunate to spend some time by myself in the Great Pyramid there, in the space of the sarcophagus, and really tune into that space. I remember I came in there. The time went by so fast before you guys came up, um, because when you lay down into sarcophagus, you enter a space of timelessness. In that space of timelessness, your whole body gets to rejuvenate itself. So as I was being there, and being very fortunate to hold the space and see how each individual was able to go inside the sarcophagus, it was like a clearing energetically took place, and then I was passing each individual up into the higher realms. And as I was passing them up into this celestial, you can say it was a celestial gateway where the astral body was illuminated, and a full activation took place of the pineal. You actually lose time. As I was looking through it, I saw that above there was no grid. There was no grid of Earth. Like each individual has a grid system around them, right? That's our mental body, how we think, how we perceive things. Like everybody knows, like this is a pen, and throughout the whole world, everybody knows, okay, this is a pen, or this is a table, or a chair. Those are like collective thoughts. Above that pyramid, there was no grids of the Earth. It was an empty, hollow space, which was the perfect Adamic sphere. And when we get into the pyramid and we start to activate it through certain vibrations and sounds, the pyramid itself starts to activate and starts to vibrate. The crystals in the stone are actually made throughout certain layers. So inside the king's chamber, it's actually made out of granite. The outside is a different layer. So what I noticed as I was standing there, that the grids and the way they laid them out, the pyramid itself, was done in such a sequence that they were holding different energy frequencies throughout the whole pyramid. And when the activation happens, there's a sphere of light that produces inside the pyramid, and beams of light go up and down through the pyramid, piercing the queen's chamber and the subterranean chamber. So we have three chambers there, which are actually activation of the three centers, three major centers of the astral body, which I go over in the workshop, activating them and merging the seven chakra systems within that field. So that took place as I saw the whole pyramid become alive. And when we walked in, there was a smell there. The smell was very like moldy, but after a certain period of time of us doing the mantras, it all dissipated and it's the wind started to blow through. So as I bring awareness into the higher channel of the pyramid, I see the Adamic sphere, the perfect sphere. Like it was emptiness. There was no time, there was no space, there was no grid level or belief system of the collective earth. So when people lay down into the sarcophagus, it becomes so much easy to transform our beliefs and our trauma because it's all stored within there. It starts to lift off into this higher celestial dimension where there's no trauma at all. So therefore, you cannot take it with you. You become timeless. So as each individual was able to lay down in the sarcophagus, I believe each one had about 4 to 5 minutes. But people afterwards came to me, they're like, Igor, I was there only for 1 minute. You kept me only there for 1 minute. I was like, no, you were there for 5 minutes because you entered into a space of timelessness. There were other people that started to see what was going on within the pyramid itself, how everything was being lifted off.
Mhm.
Everything was being lifted off. Our astral perceptions were activated, and when people came back home, I have so many texts and so many emails from people saying thank you because of the experience they had, that they are awakingly walking and seeing and feeling like a meditative state of consciousness in their everyday reality after this experience, because that really took them up higher and vibrationally into a new octave. As those pyramids create these vibrations and sounds, we know that it's a combustion chamber. It creates a piezoelectric charge. Our pineal gland creates a piezoelectric charge. So when we lay down into sarcophagus, we're actually laying down into the pineal gland of Earth. So there it takes us right away up into the higher dimensions.
Wow, yeah. The Great Pyramid was the way you explained it. Being initiated into a higher octave of awareness, like just being in the ceremony itself. Like I was just fully immersed into my heart, and my Merkaba was just like fully activated, and I was just in this state of pure Christed consciousness. And all that I had experienced the entire trip leading up to that was just all coming into my heart and all being alchemized and transformed into this purity. And this, it was an inner power, but it was an inner peace. And I yeah, it was
Would
just
you do this trip again?
what I do. I during periods during the trip, I was like, I'm never coming back here because it was so intense. And after, it's like I know I need to go back. Like I would 100% do the trip again. Like this was literally an introduction to Egypt for me.
Yeah.
It was like a clearing of like this base layer of density.
I
What was that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was a clearing of this base layer of like fear and density and all of this karmic stuff I had to work through this trip, that I know the next time, and I know I'll be back many times, but I know the next time I go, it's going to be this higher octave, a higher level experience for me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually, after we came back from Egypt, a lot of people had dreams. So what happens when you come back from Egypt? When you come back from Egypt, because every temple is a portal to a different dimension, different solar system, different star constellation, our astral body can divide into so many parts. So parts of us are still there. And a lot of people are feeling this for the next 2 to 3 months because their dreams are more vivid, their images are more vivid. They might be a little bit disoriented, but their whole spiritual aspect has been expanded and opened like a blossoming flower. And now that that happens, they are now operating in so many different dimensions simultaneously, and they're having deja vu and they're having visions and images come through. And because we go through these dimensions, it is also now opens up the doorway to the halls of Amentes. So for me, after we came back, Thoth comes through and takes me to the halls of Amentes. Last time he took me through, I had downloads in these areas of my lower body. This time they had downloads in my crown, in my headspace. Because when you walk through these halls of Amentes, it's a download of information, of wisdom. The temples are actually books. They're ethereal books that get to download into your astral body. There is no need for you to know this information, but this information is available to you when it's needed to be. It will present itself. So it kind of knows it has its own triggering of time in order for it to present itself in this reality. So as you continue working through this, I was taking to the halls of Amentes and have some downloads that was given to me. And throughout those downloads, I was shown that I need to come back there at least another 3 more times and do a full trip like this again, because these trips are transformational for each individual. They are like key codes. This is the pillar of light that finds the center of earth in order for you to radiate your lung, in order for you to radiate your sun. So it creates a perfect balance. And speaking of the sun, we were walking through Egypt. There was no real depiction of the moon anywhere. They talk about the sun all the time, and a question has arose for me: did the moon exist when the Egyptians built um, their civilization? Because if we go to Luxor, we see Luxor was built about 90,000 years ago. Now, there are some writings and there are some books and there's some proof that it was actually goes back to 90,000 years. Cairo, if you go to Cairo, we see that Cairo was built about 30 to 36,000, maybe 40,000 years ago. You can see the different architectural structures and you can see the different hieroglyphics in both of those places. Now, when we go to Luxor and we go to the temples there is no depiction of the moon. So it made me question, the moon maybe did not exist during that time period, because we do have some evidence saying that the moon was brought here in the last 10 to 12,000 years. There are some expressions of the moon in the later dynasties, which is closer to our timeline, saying that there was a god of the moon. But before that, we don't see anywhere expressing it. It always talks about, even if we take a look at the thoughts writing, it talks about uh, the sun and the darkness of the night. It does not mention the moon there anywhere. So I would be curious to see, did it really exist or it didn't exist?
Hmm. Yeah, it was interesting because when Mickey and I went to the museum
Museum?
later on, like after everyone left, um, we were really drawn to this one particular statue, and it was the god of the moon. And I was thinking, I was like, I've never heard of him. And it was from the 18th dynasty, is what the plaque said, which is obviously way later
Mhm.
on in the history of everything. Um, so I just found that like super interesting and took note of that in my mind. And then later on, when we got back home, is when you started, having these revelations. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. And um, yeah.
Well, that wraps it up. I
Yeah.
think.
So, yeah, I mean, there's so much more to share from our experience. Like, I mean, we barely touched the surface truly on all that we experienced while being there. But for the sake of time, we will close out this podcast, this beautiful conversation. Um, Thank you so much, Igor, for inviting me here and for everyone that's listening. Um, and yeah, we will definitely be doing another trip to Egypt whenever Spirit calls. So, yeah.
Listen, if you are interested, send a DM or email us, because I think there will be one in 2025, definitely. Getting a strong call on that. Plus, we do other pilgrimages to other places and other meditational retreats. So there's a lot of activation that happens. I think the next one will be in Turkey, where we go to experience Ephesus temple, which is the temple of the Divine Mother, and working with other dimensional beings. So if you are interested in that, DM us. But there's always something going on. We cannot not stop. How can we? It's part of our process. That's what we came here to do, is to be of service.
Yes. And also, Igor does weekly live free meditations on Zoom every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. So, definitely drop into those if you're able to and join the free Alignment of Light community. And all the recordings of the meditations get posted there. So if you're not able to join live, you can just join the free community and get to know everyone that is, doing this work. And yeah, so hope to see you in there. But otherwise, I think that's it.
Excellent.